Today, from the Kharkiv direction, there are a lot of updates. Here, Ukrainians launched a series of devastating strikes on the Russian rear, targeting air defense systems and ammunition depots. Furthermore, Ukrainians have intensified their reconnaissance operations to prepare for the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive toward the international border. First of all, Ukrainians launched an attack on a large Russian ammunition depot located in Hlyboke. Planet Labs satellite images show huge smoke clouds billowing from the warehouses on the outskirts of the town. Russian military analysts state that Ukrainians are launching these attacks every day now with increasing strength. In one of these attacks, Ukrainians sent a tank toward the Russian-controlled settlement of Hlyboke to fire on known and suspected Russian positions in the houses. The footage shows the tank driving to the settlement while performing evasive maneuvers, but this was especially needed as Russians were even firing salvos of devastating thermobaric rocket artillery at the vehicle. Ukrainian troops dodged the Russian artillery strikes and started relentlessly firing into the settlement. Russians also tried destroying the tank with multiple FPV kamikaze drones, which failed as the tank continued to fire and maneuver around the Russian artillery. After completing their mission, the tank crew safely returned to friendly lines for repair and resupply. Throughout the attack, the Ukrainian tank fired over a dozen high-explosive grenades into the settlement, with multiple direct hits on Russian positions, which would be filled with manpower and ammunition. Geolocated footage also shows how Ukrainian troops continued to shell Russian positions in Hlyboke with artillery, as well as attacking Russian soldiers moving in and toward the settlement with FPV drones and drone-dropped grenades. As you can see in the footage, most buildings are either destroyed or have collapsed roofs, which provide little to no cover for the Russian soldiers hiding here, making them very easy to spot for Ukrainian drone operators. Overall, the Russian situation is quickly deteriorating. Russians are suffering heavy losses as Ukrainians work intensely to completely undermine the Russian defenses and set the stage for a future counteroffensive. Ukrainian strikes on Russian ammunition depots and air defense systems also heavily contribute to the weakening of the Russian advantage in artillery and air power. If Ukrainians can continue to do so, it will allow them to be more aggressive with their own infantry, armor, artillery, and aviation, as Russians would not be able to counter them as effectively. The governor of Hlyboke stated that during a nightly drone attack, Russian air defenses had shot down 2 Ukrainian drones, but that the fragments had landed on the warehouses. However, videos shared by local residents during the day reveal a constant ammunition cook-off from the ammunition depot. A Russian opposition outlet reported that the 2 warehouses hit had over 3,000 artillery shells in storage. On top of that, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense stated that the total surface area of the depot was over 3,500 square meters, meaning that there still were many more shells that would burn throughout the day. The Ukrainian National Guard reported that they had destroyed 2 Russian Panzer self-propelled air defense systems in Belgorod Oblast. Ukrainian reconnaissance drones had spotted the Russian vehicles operating in fields near Dnipro and Borisovka before directing HIMARS attacks on these targets and destroying both of them. The Russian Panzer S-1 air defense system is a valuable tool used by the Russian military to provide air defense for ground troops and intercept Ukrainian drone attacks. Despite Russian claims that Panzer S-1 can easily do so, the Panzers completely failed to detect and intercept both the Ukrainian surveillance drones that spotted them and the HIMARS missiles flying towards them. While in the direction of Lipsy, a Russian soldier noted that for the second day in a row, Ukrainians had been pulling more manpower and equipment to their second echelon reserves behind the front line. Ukrainians have also moved more long-range artillery and HIMARS systems into the region, explaining the quick response to and destroying the Panzer systems as soon as they were detected. The soldier noted that the Ukrainian forces' concentration behind the front line indicates that Ukrainians are planning to launch a large counteroffensive operation in the near future. Ukrainian soldiers active in the area confirmed this, stating they had assembled 2 brigades, over 10,000 to 15,000 soldiers, and were preparing for offensive actions. In turn, the Russian situation is much worse, as Russian losses in the region continue to rise rapidly. Russian reports indicate many Russian soldiers go missing during the night, with no explanation as to why. The reason for this is that Ukrainians regularly perform nightly raids on Russian trenches and positions, sneaking in and out without being noticed. Another explanation is that during the night, Russian soldiers see their chance to either surrender to Ukrainians or desert their positions under cover of darkness so as not to get easily spotted by Russian barrier troops. Sensing that the opportune moment to strike was rapidly approaching, Ukrainians started launching reconnaissance in force operations on Russian positions. On the front lines, Ukrainian soldiers use a graphic term to describe the Russian tactics they face daily. They call them meat assaults, waves of Russian soldiers coming at their defensive positions, sometimes nearly a dozen times in a day. LT Colonel Anton Bayev of the Kharkiv Brigade of Ukraine's National Guard says wave after wave can arrive in just a few hours at frontline positions north of Kharkiv. The Russians use these units in most cases purely to see where our firing equipment is located, and to constantly exhaust our units, he said. Our guys stand in positions and fight, and when 4 or 5 waves of the enemy come at you in a day, which you have to destroy without end, it is very difficult not only physically, but also psychologically. This tactic has led to staggering Russian casualties since Moscow launched its latest offensive 2 months ago. Around 1,200 Russian soldiers were being killed or wounded every day in May and June, the highest rate since the beginning of the war, according to Western officials.
Пострел!